Many years ago in the quiet village of Aka, lived a girl named Uloma. She was known by everyone in the village as she was very respectful and helpful, even though life had been hard for her and her mother ever since her father died. But Uloma was always cheerful and never carried sadness in her heart. Now Uloma was not just well-behaved, she was gifted with soft hands that made good soup, quick legs that danced well at village festivals, and a soft heart that believed too easily in people, especially in one boy named Obika. He lived few compounds away from hers, and he had been her closest friend for as long as she could remember. They had gone to the same village school together, eaten from the same plates, climbed mango trees behind the Catholic church, and even gotten punished together once for sneaking roasted corn into class. Obika was the boy everyone assumed would marry Uloma one day. Not because he ever said it loud, but because their closeness looked like love to everyone, including Uloma, who would sometimes rest her head on his shoulders when they sat outside his mother's hut. She was very confident about Obika marrying her, that she would go to his house every market day to help his mother pound yam, pick okazi leaves, scrub pots with sand and sweep the entire compound while his younger ones ran around and called her Unduye, Nii, which means our wife. And even though Obika never once called her my love or said I will marry you, he gave her money when she needed to buy sanitary pads. He gave her small phone recharge cards, and he also bought clothes for her once in a while. As such, all these little things planted soft thoughts in Uloma's heart because she believed that a man who cared like that was only waiting for the right time to say the words her heart had already accepted. But some of her friends like Oluchi and Unazi didn't think Uloma was doing the right thing. One day while waiting for their line at the borehole, they pulled her aside and said, "This your Obika, are you sure he's serious? We hope he has said something with his mouth because men can play with your time like draftsboard." Uloma smiled and waved her hand. "Don't worry, Obika is not like that. He knows what he's doing. He's just not someone who talks too much." They looked at her and shook their heads in pity. "Na you sabi." However, Obika's mother loved Uloma like her own, and would boldly tell people that Uloma was the one she wanted for her son. And even though it was always said like a joke, Uloma's heart held on to it like a promise. And eventually she began to turn down suitors gently one by one, saying she was still praying or that she wasn't ready or that her mother needed her at home for now. But in reality, she was only just waiting for Obika to finally speak. And then when Obika got an opportunity to go set up a business in the city, she was happy for him because it meant growth for them. She also cried because she knew her heart was never going to be the same without him around. Still, on the day he left, she hugged him tightly, and when he said, "Take care of my mommy for me. I would send something once I settle," she nodded and smiled like John the Beloved. From that day, Uloma started watching her phone like someone waiting for a prophecy to come true. At first, Obika would call her every weekend and ask, "How is mommy? How is the village?" And she would tell him everything, including which neighbor just gave birth and how the price of crayfish went up in the market. And he would laugh and tell her about the city, business and stress, and she would feel close again. But slowly the calls reduced, the airtime stopped coming, and even his good morning messages started coming only on Sundays if at all it came. Her friends started telling her again to move on, but Uloma still believed in her heart that the boy who used to peel oranges for her behind the stream would return and say, "Let's do this forever." So she waited, and while she waited, she cooked at everyone else's wedding. Uloma cooked when Unazi married a mechanic from Obosi. She cooked when Oluchi's sister married a pastor's son from Enugu. She even helped pound yam at the wedding of Amarachi, the same girl who once mocked her cooking during home economics class. But Uloma didn't complain even when the girls in the village said things about how Obika might already have another girl in the city, or how boys who leave never come back the same, or how some of them come back with wives and children. Uloma would just smile and say, "Obika is different," and it wasn't even as if other men didn't come for her. Because one December, a tall, light-skinned tailor named Chidibere came with his parents to ask for her hand in marriage, saying he had watched her cook during the festival, and that a woman who stirs a goosey like that must have a good spirit. Honestly, Uloma's mother was very happy because Chidibere was a good man, and his workshop in Onitsha was doing well. But Uloma told them to give her time to think, and then she later sent word that she wasn't ready for marriage. Then came Chinomso the teacher, who always greeted her shyly whenever she passed by the school. And when he finally brought palm wine and biscuits with his people to visit Uloma, she told them politely that her spirit had not agreed. Even though everyone said she was being too picky for someone whose father was no longer alive and whose mother sold roasted yam for a living, Uloma didn't care because every time she remembered how Obika used to walk her home after choir practice, and how he once fought with that rude boy from Umunaku who insulted her during a football match, her chest would swell and she would smile. Let me wait a little more, because she believed that love must be loyal and patient and that all the girls rushing into marriage were just settling for less, so she continued helping people marry. She cooked at every traditional wedding in the village, waking up before dawn to roast peppers, wash bitter leaf, pound a goosey, cut goat meat, and stir big pots of soup that could feed a whole council meeting. And even when the sun burned her back and the smoke from the firewood made her eyes red, she still smiled and pounded the fufu as if she was the one getting married. And nobody ever heard her complain because she loved seeing other people happy. Well, in her heart she believed that her own day would soon come and people would also gather to cook for her. As expected, her mother began to worry because time was moving and people had started gossiping, saying things like, maybe she's too proud, or she must be secretly married to Obika's spirit. One day her mother asked her, Uloma, are you still waiting for Obika? Uloma replied without looking up, I am not waiting, Mama. I am just not ready for anyone else. Meanwhile, Obika's calls had become like Harmattan rain. It was now scarce and surprising when they came. Sometimes he would call and talk for only 30 seconds saying things like, I have been very busy, or network here is somehow. And Uloma would laugh and say, no problem. She pretended to not notice the distance growing between them, and she would pray before bed, asking God to protect him and to help her wait without bitterness. But the truth was that her hope was beginning to shake. She just didn't say it out loud. One fateful Saturday, just as the sun rose slowly that morning, Uloma headed out to cook as usual for a wedding that would be happening that afternoon. The news had been spreading for days that Adego, a lady from the next village whose family had recently moved into Acha, was getting married. And even though Uloma didn't know Adego very well, she still offered to help cook as usual because that was what she always did, helped everyone else smile while quietly waiting for her own day that never seemed to come. So she joined the other girls, laughing and pounding yam and fufu as they teased each other and splashed water. And when the smoke from the firewood stung her eyes, she wiped it with her blouse and kept stirring the pots, singing softly as the bitter leaf soup began to boil. And she danced around like someone whose joy came from deep within, because in her mind today was just another happy day for someone else, and tomorrow might be her own day, until everything changed. She was slicing onions beside the kitchen wall when her friend Oluchi walked in carrying a small keg of palm oil. But the moment Oluchi saw Uloma, she stopped and dropped the keg in shock. Ulo, she called in disbelief. Uloma looked up and smiled. Oluchi, you finally came. We've almost finished pounding the second set of yam fufu. Oluchi didn't smile back. Instead, she came closer and looked Uloma in the eye. Uloma, come. Please come with me. Why? What happened? Uloma asked, laughing nervously. Just come, Oluchi said, and pulled her by the hand. They walked a few steps away from the firewood smoke to a quiet corner near the side of the house. Do you know whose wedding this is? Oluchi asked. Of course, Uloma said. It's Adeyego now. I don't really know her, but I just came to help. Yes, Oluchi said, and bit her lips. But do you know the man she's marrying? Uloma laughed out loud. Haba, no, who cares, as long as the bride is happy. Oluchi looked at her, swallowed hard and said, it is Obika. The laughter stopped. Uloma blinked and then she smiled again slowly this time. You are joking. I am not, Oluchi said. It can't be him. Uloma smiled. Obika is not even in this village. Oluchi sighed. He came back 2 days ago. I thought you knew. They are doing the wine carrying and bride price payments today. His people are dressing up right now. They are on their way here. Uloma stood still. Her hands were shaking slightly, and for a moment it was as if all the village sounds had gone silent. The cooking, the music, the shouting, the birds, all of it faded. Oluchi, are you sure? Uloma, I wouldn't lie to you. Without another word, Uloma turned and began to run. She ran like someone being chased by a mad dog, and she didn't stop until she reached Obika's family compound where the gate was open and the compound was full of people, women tying wrappers and laughing, men in isiagu and red caps, and Obika himself standing tall in a well-pressed outfit, adjusting his cap while his uncles gave him instructions. Obika, she called out. He turned around slowly, and for a brief second their eyes met. Uloma, he said with surprise, is this true? Are you getting married today? Obika didn't speak immediately. He looked away embarrassed. Uloma, I didn't know you'll be here. At that moment her knees gave way and she collapsed in front of everyone. Uloma woke up later in her own bed at home. The ceiling looked blurry and her head ached while her chest felt like something heavy was sitting on it. The last thing she remembered was Obika turning away, avoiding her face. She turned and saw her mother beside her holding a wet cloth and praying. Uloma didn't ask questions. She already knew as she remembered everything, and that memory pulled her up from the bed like a magic wand. Without speaking, Uloma walked out of the house barefoot and headed back to Adego's compound like someone under a spell. Her mother called after her, but she kept walking and didn't stop. When she got there, the women were still gathered, stirring soup and wrapping fufu. And without a word, Uloma walked straight to the pot of soup and kicked it over with her bare leg. In 1 second, hot bitter leaf soup spilled on the sand. Everyone everyone screamed. She turned to the fufu basin, grabbed a handful of sand, and poured it into the fufu. Chai, they shouted. Are you mad? What are you doing? She has gone mad. Oh, someone shouted. Obika came running with some of his friends. When he saw her, his eyes widened. What are you doing? She didn't answer. He then turned to the youths and ordered, please take her away before she causes more trouble. They tried to hold her, and she didn't resist. She didn't cry too. She just stood there quietly as they held her hands and led her away. The people gathered there shook their heads in pity. Poor girl. She thought he would marry her, but she should have asked questions. She should have confirmed. The day after the wedding felt like the sky was mourning with Oloma. The whole of Aka village was vibrating with one story, one name and one scene that nobody could forget. How Oloma, the girl with the golden heart, the girl who cooked for everyone and waited for love like the second coming, had poured sand inside the fufu at Obika's wedding and kicked the bitter leaf soup like someone who was possessed. People gossiped about it. Children acted out the scene in front of their mothers until they were shushed, and elders shook their heads like they had seen too much in their lifetime. This kind of heartbreak is not ordinary, some of them said. She has always been too humble, others added. That is why people climb her like ladder. Meanwhile, inside her mother's compound, Oloma sat in silence. She hadn't spoken since they brought her home. She hadn't cried, and she hadn't asked for food or water. She just sat on the edge of the bamboo bed outside, staring at nothing. Her mother tried everything, begging, prayers, cold water and tears, but nothing moved her. Even Oluchi came and knelt beside her, holding her hands and begging, Ulo, talk to me now please. Even if you want to insult me, talk. But Oloma blinked slowly, like someone waking from a dream they couldn't escape. That evening, Obika came to visit her. He didn't wear his wedding clothes, but he still looked clean and calm like a man who had finished what he came to do and was now tying loose ends. He stood at the entrance of the compound, cleared his throat and knocked gently on the wood. Good evening, Mama, he greeted respectfully when Oloma's mother came out. Mama scoffed. You've come. I thought you finished everything yesterday. Mama hesitated, looked at him from head to toe and said, she hasn't spoken since yesterday. If you like, go and add salt to her wound. And she stepped aside for him to walk in. Obika stepped in slowly, and when he saw Oloma sitting by the corner, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, he paused. She looked fragile, like a painting someone had forgotten in the sun. Oloma, he called. She didn't move. It's me, Obika. Still, she did not answer him. I know you are angry, maybe even heartbroken, but I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't. Oloma turned her face slightly, but her eyes didn't blink. You and we were just friends, Obika continued. I thought you understood me. I thought we both knew what we were. I never said I would marry you. Oloma blinked again. I respected you, he said. I always saw you as someone special, but I didn't know you were waiting for me. I didn't know you turned down other men because of me. If I had known, maybe I would have. You would have what? Mama Oloma's voice interrupted from behind. Married her out of pity? Obika turned sharply. The older woman stood angrily. You think because she helped your mother, fed you when you were jobless, and followed you around like a loyal goat that she didn't deserve a proper conversation? Obika shook his head slowly. Mama, you didn't mean to destroy her, she interrupted. You didn't mean to walk into her life, collect every good part of her, then throw her into the fire at the exact moment when she was trying to serve you soup. Obika looked down with shame, and then he turned to Oloma. Please, I didn't know. I am sorry. I just came to say I am sorry. Oloma looked up and their eyes met. For a brief moment the village breeze stopped. Then slowly she stood, walked to the door of the house, opened it, entered and shut it quietly in his face. Since that wedding, Oloma became a shadow of herself. She no longer went to people's weddings to help them cook, and she ignored every market day and every invitation. Her mother watched helplessly, and even Oluchi, who tried to cheer her up with gossip and jokes, was losing hope because Oloma wouldn't even blink when people spoke. She didn't cry, and she didn't scream. She just sat, breathed, and occasionally walked to the stream, like a ghost floating on sandals, until one day, when she met a widow, whose daughter had fallen sick and had no money to buy medicine. The widow went from door to door crying, asking for help. No one opened except Oloma, who gave her the little money she had left. She didn't even stay back to be thanked. She just gave the widow the money and went back inside. After that day, she started helping her mother roast yam by the roadside again. Even though she rarely smiled or joked with customers anymore, her fire had dimmed. Yes, but it was still burning. Meanwhile, Obika's own fire had started to burn him as city life with Adagego was not the paradise he had imagined. It was just 1 month after the wedding, and Obika could see that Adagego was nothing like Oloma. She didn't like to cook or clean or do anything around the house. And worst of all, she didn't even try to adjust. Instead, she complained from morning till night. Why are we living in this dusty area? You expect me to live like a village girl after wedding you. Obika tried to calm her and remind her of why they fell in love, but even he began to wonder if it was ever love or just excitement. Every morning there was shouting in their house, and every evening there was silent treatment. Back in Asha, Oloma was slowly building her life back again. She began to speak more and interact with customers more. One day as she stood by her mother's stall, a man stopped by to buy roasted yam. His name was Chia Dully, an engineer from a nearby town. He had come to Asha for a church roofing project, and was now looking for food. You are Oloma, right? He asked. She nodded. I have heard about you. She raised an eyebrow. In a good way, though. He quickly added, I heard your food is blessed. She smiled. Thank you. Can I buy from you every day while I am around? She paused and then said, if you don't mind smoke and palm oil stains, then you are welcome. Now back at the city, time moved fast, but in Obika's house it felt like someone pressed pause and threw away the remote. 3 months into their marriage, and Obika's friends had stopped checking in because every time they visited, Diego was either shouting about how the pepper soup didn't have enough pepper, or she was curled on the couch scrolling endlessly on her phone and looking at them like hungry gluttons. Obika knew that marriage wasn't the romantic dance they showed in movies. It was in reality about cooking, cleaning, managing fuel, fixing generator wires, adjusting water pipes, and still smiling before your head exploded. He understood that quite all right. But the problem was that his lovely new wife, Diego, didn't share this understanding with him. He had tried to make her understand that cooking dinner was the least she could do to support him for working long hours every day. But Diego, the fine wine that she was not interested in anything that required fire, frying or lifting a broom, and eventually Obika gave up. He started waking up early to prepare beans and yam before heading to work, and he began learning YouTube recipes for vegetable soup and jollof rice. His shirts now smelled of Maggi and palm oil. Inside him, Obika burned with shame. This was not the life he imagined. He remembered how Uloma used to kneel down to serve him steaming white rice with fried fish and sauce. How she used to sprinkle scent leaves on his meal like blessing. How she once pouted when he forgot to say thank you after eating her food. But now he would finish cooking and still have to beg the bride to eat. And Madame Diego would touch the food and frown. Why is there too much crayfish in this sauce? Why is the meat not soft? Why did you use this kind of plate to serve me? Obika wanted to warn her, but he had no right. After all, he was the one that chose beauty without loyalty. He was the one that left a wife in spirit for a wife in lipstick. So he endured. He cooked, cleaned, and stopped telling his friends what was going on in his house. Because who would believe that Obika, the big boy, now knew how to price crayfish in the market? As for Uloma, she continued to see Kiadili every day at her mother's stall because the young man couldn't get enough of her pepper sauce. He tried to bring up light conversations with her, but Uloma was still cautious. He once told her, your yam yesterday still lives in my mouth. I even dreamt about it. Uloma smiled and told him, then you should drink hot water before it builds a house there. She smiled, but it wasn't deep because she was still scared. She had seen how men could joke with your time and leave you in shame. But Kiadili continued to show that he was different. He respected her silence and didn't push, but he was very vocal about how he feels whenever he was with her. And she let him. Not because she was weak, but because she was finally experiencing what it means for a man to pursue. Months later, Obika came to the village without telling anyone. He just appeared and walked slowly to Uloma's mother's stall, unsure of what to expect. She was arranging the roasted yam on the table, while Kiadili stood beside her, pointing at something in her hand. She looked calm and happy. She was even laughing. Obika stopped and hid at a corner until Kiadili left. Then he approached and said, Ulo. She turned and her smile froze. I heard you are doing well. You look good. She nodded. And the man that was here, we thank God for him. Uloma smiled. He swallowed hard. I came to say I am sorry again. Uloma looked at him deeply. You already said that. Besides, I finally understand. Understand what? Obika asked. That people only treat you like nonsense when they think you don't have any sense. Uloma, please. I forgive you. Uloma said. Whether I forget or not doesn't matter anymore. And with that, she turned and continued arranging her yam. It was a bright Saturday morning in Aka village, and everyone was excited because a wedding was happening that day. However, this wasn't the wedding of some random villager. This was Uloma's wedding. The same Uloma who poured soup away and spoiled fufu at someone else's wedding just last year. The same Uloma whose silence made the entire village walk on tiptoes. The same Uloma who once sat by her mother's house like a statue mourning her own breath. She was now dressed in coral beads and expensive George wrapper and blouse, smiling like a proud bride. She was marrying Kiara, not because he promised her heaven and earth, but because he proved with his actions that he didn't see her as a convenience or as a backup plan. Instead, he saw her as a partner, a prize, and a woman whose wounds didn't make her less of a wonder. That evening, when the wedding was over, Uloma followed Kiadili to his house at the city, and just as she was settling in, Kiadili brought her roasted corn and coconuts. She took a bite and smiled. You didn't tell me marriage came with food gifts. He grinned. I am only trying to impress my wife. Uloma looked at him and paused. I used to cook for people, all my friends, even strangers. I would wake up before sunrise to pound yam, stir egusi soup, and wash plates till my fingers wrinkled. But nobody ever asked me if I wanted to eat too. Nobody ever fed me. Chiatali brought out a bottle of malt and gave it to her. Then let me be the first. She received it, and tears of gratitude poured down from her face. Meanwhile, in Obika's flat, Adamas Gu was filming a TikTok video about lazy village men who couldn't afford shawarma, while Obika stood in the kitchen turning a soup and trying to bypass the smoke coming from the burner. This was the same pot someone had willingly turned for him countless times, only that he never put any value to it. Now this same pot turning had come in full circle, making him the turner, and he had no idea how long the cooking spoon would last in his hands.